Alrighty, guys. Sorry for the little technical hang up we had there. I had to get on the internet and look up some stuff to make sure we were able to get Mr. Nick on today, and we finally worked that technical difficulty out. So, without y'all been asking for Mr. Nick since literally we had our first guest on. It's taken a while, and thank God we finally got the man himself here. Before we hand it over to him, though, I do need to give a little promotion for him. He's got his two SOG biographies, which, not biographies because these are actually written more for his compatriots to look back on times and kind of remember stuff. So it wasn't really meant in a sense for all of us, but it kind of took off that way. But we've got his first one, We Few, probably my favorite, to be honest. And then Whispers in the Tall Grass. And he did us a major favor by continuing the legacy of his craziness. And he recently came out with his good friend and co-author, Mr. Jeff Miller, who is a Special Forces veteran as well, Vagabonds, Tourists in the Heart of Darkness. All of these will be linked into the show notes, but if y'all all have been requesting this, I know y'all have already got these books. So before I jibber jabber too long and bore all of y'all to death, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Nick and let him introduce himself to you guys for a bit.
Okay, my turn.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, hello out there. As Bud said, I wrote a series. I actually wrote one book in the beginning. Well, let's go back up. I entered the service in around 1965, and I gradually conned my way far enough. I finally got into SF selection and went to SF selection around mid 1969, and that's where my journey really started. You know, I had a combat tour before that, but it was nothing like what I set out to do when I joined Special Forces. In those days, the height, the pinnacle of being in the Army was being in Special Forces. There was no better job, no greater danger, no bigger obstacle than what was faced by Special Forces in its operations and that. And I desperately wanted to be in on that. So I made my way to training group. I graduated, spent some time with the 6th Special Forces group, and then got Mrs. Billy Alexander into getting me on a levy to go to Vietnam. And I went to Vietnam and arrived first in Saigon, and we almost got shanghaied by them. And in those days, if you were Special Forces and somebody saw a chance to Shanghai you and take you up to First Division or the air cav or anything else that was floating around, they always needed NCOs, and they were always more than happy to kidnap you. So when we were at the repo depot in Da Nang or in Saigon, I sent Bernie O'Connell up to make sure our orders didn't get changed. And he came back and he said, I got a great deal for us. We're not going to the divisions and that. I got us on a Special Forces assignment. We had a Special Forces assignment. So why did he need to change it? So I quizzed him. He said, well, the Mike Force is all full up. But I found another project, and there's a line of guys waiting to get in. And I looked at him, I said, the only line in this country are the guys waiting to get out. It turns out, he told me, he said, well, what's the unit? He goes, CCN. I almost shit myself because I knew some guys that had been in projects back at Bragg, and they universally were odd. So I said, all right. So we went up to Da Nang. We processed into CCN, and the rest is history. It was from there, and we got assigned to a recon team, and for the next year or 2 years, or however long you stayed alive or were willing to keep signing up, you were going to run penetration reconnaissance. I finished up my tour and came back. I went to Fort Devens after language school en route at Monterey. I took Hungarian because originally I'd been assigned to go to a Burmese project in Burma, and they canceled the project 6 weeks into the language school. So again, avoiding the press gangs from the 7th Infantry Division over at Fort Ord, I got my orders changed to go to Fort Devens, the 10 Special Forces Group, with Hungarian en route. So I did a year in language school, which, by the way, for a young man of 24, 25, language school was a target-rich environment, because the only people that went to language school were the MAG groups, Special Forces, Military Intelligence, and Army Security Agency, who were mostly female WACs. So it was a great tour. I ended up getting married there and ended up in Fort Devens with a wife and a baby on the way. I spent almost 4 years at Fort Devens, and I managed to get assigned to the 39th Special Forces, or what was called Detachment A, which was the Special Forces detachment inside West Berlin. And I finished up my military career there. I did 6 years in Berlin. So that, in a nutshell, other than a stint as an exotic dancer in the Philippines, is my history.
Wow. And I wish I would have brought the book out, but Mr. James Stechkel, I always butcher his last name. He had a great
Daysco, just call him Stick.
Stick. Okay. We've had him on before, and he covered the book actually twice now. And he spoke about Dead A, and spoke highly of you, of course. And it seems like there's just as much as there is an interest in SOG, there's a huge growing interest now that some of you guys that were on Dead A have been able to come out and actually speak about it. So maybe we might have some more books out here in the future from Dead A.
I'm finishing up a book about Berlin right now that I've talked to the publishers. They hope to have it out by fall. They want to change the name of it, but the name I gave to it was Cobblestones. And it's an account of clandestine service behind the Iron Curtain, basically is the title of it. It's somewhat of a kiss and tell.
So, I mean, is it going to be kind of in the same vein as We Few Whispers or Vagabonds, depending on your pronunciation?
Pretty much so.
Oh, great. I can only imagine the shenanigans that we'll see and the stuff that y'all got into in Berlin. I'll be looking for. Did you say you had a projected release date or something you're planning on for
Well, they
that?
said that they want to try and publish it, get it on the bookshelves in the fall. I still have to give them a manuscript, completed manuscript by April 30th, in order for them to hit that time zone and that.
Wow.
I
Oh, yeah.
had thought about self-publishing, but I'm an extremely lazy person. That may be beyond the tipple there. But you got to remember something: authors are the cannon fodder of the publishing business.
We've heard some, especially with the guys that had to get their works back when Paladin shut down and go over to Casemate. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get Ray Harris to reprint Break Contact and Continue Mission with Casemate. And boy, yeah, it sounds like they really put y'all through the ringer to get a book
The
out.
thing that keeps Casemate alive and makes him interesting at all is Ruth Shepard, who's in Oxford. Their marketing department and the rest of them, the only thing they do is pick up the phone and answer it. They're not really, the brightest bulbs in the pack when it comes to marketing. somebody's work. Well, they got a lot of works. You know, they make it up in volume.
Who is going to be the publisher for the Dead A book?
Probably Casemate.
Casemate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they do put out quality books. I mean,
Yeah, they do that. I mean, the first one, when I first published We Few, excuse me, it was a paperback, and a little known outfit out of St. Louis called War Stories, and really nice guy that ran that. But you know, he wasn't able to get the numbers up, and the binding was poor. The book fell apart as you read it. And an interesting side note: when I got an invitation from a National Guard mechanized infantry unit out of San Diego that had done a deployment in Iraq, and they were having their welcome home dinner, and they asked me to come down and say a few words and sign my book. They had one copy of my book that they had passed around that it had fallen apart, so they took each individual chapter and put it in a Ziploc bag and swapped them around till everybody got a chance to read the book.
Oh, that is, I mean, I can see it because some of my books are falling apart, and that actually reminds me of today. A buddy was talking about his We Few, and I think he had a paperback edition.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
his
Well, they're
completely fell.
collector's items now.
His completely has fallen apart, and he did just that. He's got the cover, and everything else is in a plastic bag, protecting it like baseball cards.
Well, you can get more money for it if you can actually get some of my DNA on some of the pages, which could be accomplished by buying copious amounts of good whiskey and stirring it.
With when what group? Because I've always been interested because I don't think it's been mentioned. You may have mentioned it with Jason. I can't remember. Your first tour in '66, I believe. You were the first cav, correct?
I was a cook in the Navy. Don't tell anybody. Now, my life in Vietnam really started with my tour and project. I mean, everything before then was a learning process. You know, when I finally arrived at CCN, it was okay. You're going to be in the batter's box pretty soon here. You know, pull your britches up. That you know, it's a shame. The best part of my career in the military was during a war. You know, Dead A came close to satisfying the, you know, what you'd like to get out of life and that, but my formative years were in projects. You know, it was probably I talking to Elden Bargewell one time, and he was telling about it when Operation Anaconda went off. Anaconda was Eldon's team, and in Vietnam. So it's not surprising that operation to root the Taliban out of the caves over in the Karsk was named after his old recon team. But some general asked him, said, "Aren't you frightened of the danger you're putting these young men in?" And he looked him dead in the eye and says, "When they're in as much danger as I was in Laos on a recon team, I'll start worrying about it." So, and different mindset. I always tell people that special forces is not a job description; it's a way of life. It really is. I mean, it's something as strong as the Bushido. That's why so many people try and bullshit people and tell them, "Oh, I was in special forces." Yeah, sure you were. Yeah. So
It's quite easy though after speaking to the real deals like you guys and been lucky enough to actually meet and be amongst y'all in person. It's quite easy to spot the phonies after you've been around the real deals like yourself.
well, I mean, yeah, it's all these guys that like the guy I like best is that SEAL. What's his name, Schmedley or Shipley? And it goes after all the the stolen valor people and that. I mean, I like him because A, he looks like a master chief. You know, it looked like he could take a pipe wrench and, you know, bounce it off his skull and he wouldn't even grimace. But you know, that was the old school SEALs. Guys like Scotty Lyon, you know, back when they were still UDT. Of course, I think Shipley came in after they'd done the transition. But I do a lot of the old SEALs from back in the 60s. And they were a considerably different crowd. It was all UDT guys. They came in one day and said, okay, here's your credit, and this is what you're doing now, change of mission. It wasn't that much of a change. In fact, their mission still says to protect the fleet. So, but you know, everything evolves eventually. Everything evolves.
I mean, since you brought that up, I'm sure the question will come up. We're already getting a lot in, but with you being at CCN, did you ever cross paths with any of the SEALs or Force Recon guys associated with SOG, the NAD guys?
Wait. Let's back up here, okay?
Okay.
Something I do want to set straight.
Okay.
There were Marines at Op 80 at the headquarters, and there were Force Recon with the nasty boats.
Okay.
And I've heard rumors, but I've never seen any proof. I never knew any Marines that ran recon in the projects, and there was only a few more SEALs that transitioned over, and I think they went to Central. One or two guys that were working on the team, but as a unit, the SEALs they had their own thing that they were doing. They were down in 4 Corps, anywhere where there's a lot of water, you'll find the SEALs, and they had to play in the base there at Tenshan in Da Nang, where they ran the nasty boats up the coast and into North Vietnam. And there were some Force Recon guys that worked with them, but Force Recon was not a unit that was assigned to SOG. And I don't believe the SEALs were until after 68 or something like that, when they actually became a line item in the flow chart. So it's, you know, everybody now, you know, they changed it. Like when we formed up the Special Operations Association, it was basically for us that were Vietnam veterans that felt like we really weren't getting a lot out of the Special Forces Association, which in those days was run by the veterans of Bad Tolls and Fort Bragg and, you know, the khaki mafia that was up on the hill up there. So we formed up my brother-in-law, Jim Butler, God rest his soul. He was membership card 001. And it was all put together at a meeting at the Decade Club in Fort Devens when we started the association. And it was originally for recon. Wasn't for anybody else. It was just recon. If you were in recon, you could get into the SOA, as we called it, you know. Sons of arthritis. Yeah. But then they broadened it, and when the colonels got in there and started, anytime you get two colonels together, they got a different idea about where the direction's going in that. So they turned it into, okay, so for example, if you wanted to join in those days, you had to be recommended by a member in good standing. And then they did a background check, who vouched for you and that. And then you were on probation for a year, as was your sponsor. If you fucked up and they found out you were telling lies, you got bounced and he got bounced for not doing his homework. But then they changed it to, okay, if you were a unit that was assigned to SOG or SOG missions, you could join. And then, well, the big step we took, which I said in the beginning was a mistake, was to allow the air crews to be associate members. I was all for that because they flew us in, and then they were dumb enough to come back and pick us up. But those guys, the air crews that actually flew us, I was all for. Associate members, they just couldn't hold office, and they didn't take part in the business meetings, which in effect, we saved them a lot of grief. Anybody that's ever sat through 4 hours of one of those business meetings. Roger's Rules of Order. So, and then I was at one of the conventions one year, and some guy sidled up next to me. He goes, "Unloaded bombs on an A1E that flew a bombing mission for SOG," and he was an associate member. The 455th Bomb Ordnance Group, and that, so they did it by units rather than by individuals or air crews, and that. So we ended up with the basketball control officer and the mess sergeant and whoever else was in there, and it kind of took away from the SOA. But I've been accused of being persnickety and pugnacious, so.
I've heard some of the early stories. There's Mr. Jim when he was at NKP here in his picture. I've heard some rowdy stories of those early SOARs, SOA reunions. That
used to auction off a hooker.
I was about to say I wasn't going to speak and tell, but since I'll let you share.
This is back. Here's what we used to. That was the grand door prize. Everybody pitched in, and of course, in those days, the convention was held in one suite or one set of suites at the Sahara, the Aladdin, whichever hotel hadn't thrown us out the year before. And they got pretty wild in that. But we had this raffle, and the prize was a hooker. Of course, all of us were in like our mid to early to mid 30s at that time. So full of rambunctiousness. And then one day somebody brought their girlfriend or their wife, and it turned into Wednesday night at the Officers Club. Yeah. I like it better than the old days. We had some guy die. Somebody brought, I forget, it wasn't Lions. Somebody else brought a CB, a guy who was a CB, nice guy, a big heavy equipment operator, and he had a heart attack. And it was like 2:00 in the morning. We were playing poker in the main room and that, and somebody said, I think Albert here, I think he passed away. What do you mean? He's dead. So we went back. He was in the John, and he had a heart attack sitting on the John. So we got him off the John, cleaned him up, put him in the bathtub, and we were debating whether or not to call security. When we called security, there goes the night of drinking and a poker game. He ain't going anywhere. So we went down to the ice machine and we filled the bathtub up with ice to preserve the body, and forgot all about it. And the next morning, the scream that woke us up was from one of the maids who went in to clean the bathroom and found a corpse floating in an ice bath in the bathtub. Yeah, that was that the Oriental? I think we were at the Oriental because we got immediately frisked and sent off site, told not to come back for a couple of years. That early one, and they used to have it the same weekend or the same week as the Soldier of Fortune convention. Bob Brown and his merry band of hoodlers and that were at another hotel nearby, and then usually the Rhodesians, all the guys that went to Rhodesia, Early, Werther, or not Werther, Wolcroft, all those guys that had gone and fought in Rhodesia, had their reunion across the tracks at some cheap dive hotel, like 3 stories with iron balustrades and all that. Yeah, so it used to be a hell of a thing. Of course, the Soldier of Fortune convention had this huge convention center with full of booths, people selling silencers. Every other person was some kind of undercover phoebe. Yeah, it was. Those are the good old days in Vegas, and it's very sedate now. They have their moments. Like 2 years ago, Cubby Bath rode his motorized wheelchair down the escalator. That was a good one. They were putting him on the gurney and waved me over. He goes, "Tell him Jay Graves was driving. It's a one-man scooter."
Jay Graves, another legendary recon man. Was Mr. Jay Project Delta as well?
Right. Jay was Delta. Of course, in the later years, he was all over the damn country. He'd pop up in Phu Bai, and pop up in Quang Tri, pop up in Da Nang, and nobody really knew what he was doing over there. He was like the roving ambassador of insanity. But he was
Back
at
to
Delta. He spent a long time in Delta. His nickname in Delta was China Boy because
China boy.
his eyes always squinted. He looked like an Oriental when he got about half pissed.
That's hilarious. I a
Okay.
lot of people are wanting to know what it was like when you first, of course, reading it, but your first contact with Captain Maines. Everybody's always interested in Captain Maines.
Well, imagine yourself in front of an alien life form, exactly like that. Ah, Larry. Well, Larry was a Mustang. He'd been a former E7, and then they taught him how not to scratch his nuts with a salad fork and made him a captain. But Larry always in his heart of hearts was a master sergeant. Yeah, very pugnacious. He looked like I described him to Jim Hollingsworth one time. Imagine something that been living on a heavy gravity planet, so it's squashed down, real compact and square, with no neck, just a square head on top of it. He said first time he met Manus, he goes, "Your description fit him to a T." Yeah. And Larry was a very talented individual. He'd been an NCO and Special Forces, and he got a direct commission. He was really the perfect choice for being the company commander of Recon Company because he was tough as anybody there, and he didn't take crap from anybody, either upstairs or down below him. If you had a problem and Larry had a problem with you, you were going to get it settled. Yeah. So my first impression of him was what we went from the top down to Recon Company with all the little duffel bags. You got all your brand new jungle fatigues, everything slammed into a duffel bag, and you get assigned to Recon Company, which is a series of metal roofed buildings with grenade walls made out of sandbags that have been covered up with cement up to about the houses actually sit up off the ground a couple of feet, and a grenade skirt goes all the way to the ground. And that grenade skirt that actually came into being after 1968 when the camp got overrun. Then they put those up. Anyway, you come to Recon Company, which is right across from the Recon Club and the mess hall, the main PSP pathway to the orderly room and to the hooches beyond. And there's a series of, like, I think three lines of buildings on one side of that path and 4 lines of buildings on the other side of that go all the way back to almost to the beach. And that was Recon Company, where the team hooches were, where the Americans lived. Then over on the right, beyond the shower facility, and that were the yard hooches, which were one continuous building divided into team rooms, and they ate, slept, cooked, raised their puppies, whatever they did right there in those buildings. So we get to the orderly room, which is right after the first line of buildings, and there on the right is the orderly room, and we're all gathered up in the shade underneath the awning of one of the buildings. And the door to the orderly room bursts open, and this guy comes flying out, cartwheeling, and that hits the ground, face first into dirt. Kind of shakes himself a little bit, gets up, and stumbles off back towards the back of the Recon Company. 2 minutes later, this troll comes to the door, blonde hair, square face, uh, you know, uh, no neck. Every time he moves his shoulders and that. Let me tell you what, my man, you're the poster child for abuse. And I happened to ask him, because we'd heard it was a voluntary unit, why that gentleman had ended up in the sand. And he said that he wanted to quit. Well, I thought it was voluntary. It is voluntary. I don't like whiners. And end of conversation. You're going to be assigned to HABU because you're a barracks room lawyer. I can see that right now. Larry was an interesting study. Absolutely one of the finest officers I ever served under. And to this day, I stay in contact with him by calling the nursing home or whatever hospice he's being lodged in for the week and antagonize him. When are you going to come and bright light me? Never.
I mean, he, like you said, he was around a long time. I was just showing a photo of him, and strangely
He was
enough,
in Nam, I think, in '64. First time he went over.
62. He was at A14. Yeah,
Oh yeah, well that figures.
with Mr. Ray Echeverria, who sadly went MIA at CCC.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Larry's a legend in many ways. We went to when Butler's daughter got married. It was on Maui, and the women of the family gave me the task of keeping Butler out of the wedding, getting ready, and all that, and said take him over to the Big Island and visit Larry. So I did. Main thing was to keep him drunk so he wouldn't get involved in a wedding until the proper time for him to show up and walk down the aisle. So we went over to visit Larry. Now we're in our SOG shirts, the the polo shirts with the SOG emblem and that. And we're at the airport over in on Maui, and Jim's on the phone and he's talking to Larry, and he goes, "Oh well, yeah, we're coming over. We're flying over on Air Aloha Air on Flight 64. Yeah. We're coming in. Gate 13. Yeah. We'll be there at 11:30 and that." And he goes, he hangs up and he goes, "Wow, Larry must be looking forward to seeing us. He was all interested in what we were wearing and what time we were coming in." I slapped him. Said, "You don't smell an ambush? Boy, you are, a moron." So we are not going anywhere near Aloha Airlines. So we went and hired one of those puddle jumpers. It goes, little. The one we got was a Cessna. The I forget the model of it. It's the best Cessna they ever made, and carry like 1,000 pounds, and 10 passengers, and everything. And the pilot looks like Beaver. On Leave It to Beaver. He looked that young. In fact, on the way over to the Big Island, he had to make a couple of touch and goes because his dad wants him to work on his landings and takeoffs and that. We're sitting in the back. We fly over to Hilo, land there, and now the executive airplane, private airplane terminal is like here. Then there's the main road coming into the terminal from Hilo, and then the other side is our gate for Flight 64. It's a big open air thing, right? And we're watching it. When we landed, I'm looking, and there's cops everywhere. There's cops in the bushes. There's cops on the overpass. There's dog cops. There's narc cops. There's SWAT cops, and they all seem to be centered around Aloha Air. So we get out. Hey, we got Butler, the master of the obvious. He goes, "Wow, looks like they're looking for somebody." Yeah. Hey, you dummy, us. So instead of being on the Aloha flight, and instead of going to the hotel that we had given Larry the address to where we were staying, we rented a room in the hotel right next door across the parking lot from it. So we zipped out of the private air, went down to the hotel, went up to the room. We're standing on the balcony. I had my little opera binoculars with me in that. And I'm looking down, I'm talking to Larry on the phone. Where are you? I'm down there at the airport. So we came in on an earlier flight. We're at the hotel. So we watched the parking lot. The SWAT cops come, the canines come, the regular cops come. And finally, Larry pulls up, gets out of his car. In Hilo, it rains all the time. So there's about probably 8 inches of water in the parking lot. And he's stomping it across it. And with his height, it's above his knee. So he looks like this troll dragging through the parking lot. Where are you? So we're watching you with your little green raincoat. out in the parking lot. And they kept rubbernecking up at the hotel, wrong hotel. Gotcha. He tried to set us up, you bastard. And he did. Because half of the police force are related to him in one way or another. He either sired them or was there for their, communal, or I don't know, they pulled him out of the volcano. But yeah, Larry, we ended up going to his favorite hangout was a place called the Bamboo Curtain. And it was a cop hangout. All the PD hung out there. And it was run by a 7-foot Korean bookie. They had all kinds of TVs up on the walls, and before they had flat screens, just regular TVs around there. And then Andy, a friend of Larry's, a friend of mine. How much money does he owe you? Yeah, Larry. Larry's a jewel. Always was and always will be.
God bless him. God bless him. Well, when you finally get I guess thrown over to the wolves to HABU, do you end up meeting, is Mr. Ken Holmes there at this time, or do you first meet Mr. Mini Mac?
Kenny was on the team for about 5 months. Well, in the first 5 months I was there.
Okay.
4 or 5 months, something like that. And then he went up to the Alamo, the top, and became an AST, basically your target intel guy. The guy who gives you get assigned a target. He finds all the after action reports that are related to it, all the reconnaissance photos related to it, all the intel data that's been, from radio intercept, and that puts it in a packet for you. So when you go into isolation, you know exactly what happened there, all the way back to like the mid '60s in some cases, and that, yeah.
Damn.
But then he ran the bright light with Mac on Hollingsworth and Denke, because I was down at 1-0 school, I think, at that time. I got sent to 1-0 school. I had just come back from 1-0 school when they had already launched for that bright light. So I was en route to Quang Tri because they were supposed to have a backup mission, and I was joining the team again. And basically, when I got there with the Caribou, Mac and them all filed on board, so we're going back to Da Nang. So we went back to Da Nang and went through the debrief on the bright light, and they did, and I went to the club. And when they got done, we had a 3-day stand down, and we picked up another target right after that.
Gosh, I should say, I recently spoke to Mr. William Case Ears, I guess as y'all called him, and that's what he was trying to get across to me, that how dangerous 71 and 70 on until y'all got done, that I mean y'all were being run ragged with missions.
Oh, it was a totally different game than in 1968 or 1967. By the time 1970 rolled around, you couldn't sneak and peek anywhere west of San Francisco. There were just so many troops, so many concentrations, so much activity, and the targets. I mean, they don't want to send you where they don't suspect they are. They want to send you where they suspect that there's heavy concentration. That means you're looking for divisional headquarters, bunker complexes, truck parks, pipelines, caches, and all kinds of angry little shits were living on rice and fish heads. So, and we did a lot of like bomb damage assessments. I didn't mind those because everybody was too cooked on the ground by the time you got on the ground. And, you had to wait 30 minutes for there to be enough oxygen on the ground for you to sustain you while you moved around. And anybody on the ground, if they were still alive and they were functioning, they were also pissed off. But normally all you found was body parts and, charred remains and that after an arc light went there. But the other stuff was, I had comments on my first book. Some guy had been besieged in Way, And he said, I don't believe this guy. Bullshit. He was surrounded all the time and that. I was surrounded in 30 days for 30 days with my company and way and that. And I actually wrote it back. I looked up his address, found him. I said, first of all, you were in there with 240 swinging dicks and a battalion with Marines with Ontos 106s and tanks and everything. And you were surrounded. It's a lot different than getting off the helicopter, getting on a helicopter, knowing you're going someplace that you're going to be surrounded until they drag your bleeding carcass out of there. So it's a totally different ballgame. So you are the one that don't know what you're talking about. And then he told the publishers that I threatened him. I did not threaten him. I suggested I'd like to, adjust his tie, but I didn't threaten him.
I mean, he went as so far as to say in there in those years y'all were running that he'd go so far as to say y'all were bait and trying to get the, like you said, the arc lights in there to really wreak havoc as best they could.
Oh yeah, but Butler, when he came back to Devens, when I got to Devens, he was still running this little scam that he had going. They were using lasers to paint tanks during the big offensive, the spring offensive, and that, and painting them so that the B-52s could see them and actually drop bombs on the tanks and that. Of course, in those days, the lasers looked like a violin case. They were like that, I'd hold them on your shoulder and that. But I tried to get on the project, but they left town before I could get schmoozed in the front door. I had just come from language school. And I'm going, I need to be on this because this is going back and putting it down. Because the last time I saw Quang Tri was when the North Vietnamese took it. But just before that, it was just, they started shelling Quang Tri City at 2:00 in the morning, and they didn't stop shelling it for 3 days.
Damn.
And the western end of Quang Tri were all the MACV compound and the medevac people and the Vietnamese Rangers had a compound and that. Everything was flat except one building that hadn't been touched. Everything around it had been blown down to the ground. Guess what it was?
No idea.
The whorehouse.
Oh, Jesus.
It was, that every one of those NVA, platoon sergeants are going, all right, we make sure this is marked on the map. I joked with Davidson. I said, if we get overrun in that, maybe we can get a job, slomping up the floors with the new management. Yeah, the whorehouse was the only thing that survived.
Wasn't Quang Tri y'all's launch site that Mr. Pappy Boudreaux ran for y'all?
Yeah, Pappy ran Quang Tri. Quang Tri was the best launch site to go out of. Hottest targets, worst targets, but by far the best run launch site because Boudreaux had been a 1-0 before. And Pappy wouldn't put you on the ground unless he absolutely was assured he had enough air assets to get you out. He might skate on it for a while, but he knew. Whereas Fubai, when the particular crowd was there during that time, they put 3 teams on the ground on the same day and only have enough air assets to get one of them out. So I didn't like going to Fubai. I lobbied with Mac. I said I'd rather take the hotter targets, knowing that we got backup, than to go to Fubai and get hung out on a limb. Well, Case got hung out on a limb out there, and him and Kennedy, I think it was Kennedy, was with him, and they couldn't get him out. They had to pull out 2 other teams, and the other 2 teams were on the run, and they hadn't been hit yet, but they could hear and see a lot of movement around them, and that. Covey came over and Case was on the radio. Says, "You all right down there? Team okay? I'm just sitting here eating this can of peaches." Case.
He was letting me know about one of his. No, it wasn't his first mission. It was the mission, Hurley Gilpin's first mission, and they got in, and I think he said it was a Quang Tri launch, and they got the hell shot out of them, and Hurley ended up getting his CIB and learning how to extract by strings and all of that, all on his first mission. And he said that's when he went into more detail, saying it just got hotter.
Hurley Gilpin got on HABU
Mm.
in just enough time to watch the project close. I never knew he ran a mission. I heard that he ran 1 or 2 missions in that, but they closed the project out before he got anywhere. I ran into him years later up at the 10th group, and he was a warrant officer or something in that. But you know, somebody told me, "Well, that's Mr. Recon." Okay.
Yeah, I was about
Whatever,
to say he was,
you know, in your own head or otherwise. I never considered myself Mr. Recon. I was too busy sniveling.
he and Mr. K said he tried to do all the sniveling he could to keep from running those targets, because he said it was just hell on earth down there.
Well, you were bait. I mean, bottom line, that's what you were. You were bait. You know, in the old days, it was sneak and peek, area recon, point recon, and all that. But it got to the point, really, what you were doing was being put in there so they'd come up on the radios. And then, you know, while you were on the ground in that, not Moonbeam, what was the other one? The one,
Hillsborough.
You know, anyway, one of the RDF planes would be flying around looking for signal strength, looking for, you know, signal locations and that. And then they pull your ass out, bomb the hell out of it with TAC air, and then come back a day later with B-52s and bomb it into snot rags. And then you go in and do a BDA. Yeah, for that, but you know, getting on the ground, and we were still trying to do prisoner snatches. We were still trying to do wiretaps, and still trying to do reconnaissance. But it was getting more and more difficult to do anything other than save your life once you got on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, your book or both books clearly indicate the ramp up in activity. There's a few questions. I'll end up having some, but we've already gotten a good bit of questions. If you don't mind, if we hit a few of them.
All right, let's hit them.
All righty. The man, the myth, the legend. All I'd like to know is
stuff. You know what fish does in this stuff? Yeah.
They go to the bathroom in it.
That's right. And other things.
All I want to know is what did Cookie do in Saigon that got everyone talking and avoiding y'all like the plague?
Nope, not going to answer that.
Still can't get him. Still can't get him on that one.
This day, I don't know, and don't want it. Everybody else in Vietnam know. I mean, get hold of somebody that was at Saigon or up at the Air Force Base, and that, because they knew, because they looked at us like we were, you know, like we had syphilitic lesions all over our face and that. But they'd never tell us, and Rob wouldn't tell us. All he would say was, "I hear you guys are in trouble."
Oh God! Could you please talk? We know about Mr. Rob from Mr. Bob Ramsey making their static line, but could you speak a little bit about what Captain Rob was like when you knew him?
Twisted, spooky, big balls, and smart. And you know, people don't realize the relationship we had with their officers was unique.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, "Well, you guys didn't respect your officers." Bullshit. We respected them mucho. A bad officer didn't last long because the other officers got rid of them. Because you know, and we were a meritocracy. You could be a captain, and if you just got on my team and I was 1-0, I'm in charge because I'm the most experienced man. It's a meritocracy. So you know that kind of shifts out a lot of the half-steppers. There was a captain that came in. In fact, Captain Rob was in on his demise. He came in from, where the hell was he? He'd been with some mag unit down south, MACV, and he came up there. He was an advisor to the Rangers. And he came up there and he was assigned to Recon Company, and he made the mistake of getting drunk at the officers club. And he was up there telling all that could hear how he he had been there for 2 days and how slovenly, ill-disciplined, insubordinate group of assholes we were. And then when he got down to Recon Company, he was going to snap some vigor into us. They got him drunk at the officers' club, duct taped him, took him down to the yard shitters, and stuck him in one of those 55-gallon drums and slid it in under the hole and left him there overnight. They found him the next morning. He was gibbering. He'd gone mad, quite mad, from the hot pepper diet that had been spraying over him all night. Yeah. But Rob was very special. You know, he had been with Fulong, the Phoenix program, and I think he'd been shifting around. So, you know, Rob had been there for like 5 years.
A Cap Marine also.
You know, and Taylor, they were like, you know, the 3 horsemen of the apocalypse. Add Butler to that, you got a mutant owl. But he came over. He had a Vietnamese team, and when he quit, they quit. He got reassigned to NKP and quit running recon, and all his Vietnamese walked out the gate the same day. They couldn't run with Captain Rob. They weren't going to run with anybody. You know, by that time, Ramsey was gone. I mean, this is in like 70. But Rob was very special, and I was good friends with him right up to when he died. And you know, he's just a wonderful guy, really smart, devilish. Give you an example. We're in Washington, D.C. God, this is years after the war. I was down there. We were trying to flog some rubber boot or something to the Army, and Rob was he was with the boot manufacturer. That's right. And we were trying to flog something else. And he drove like a 10-year-old Saab, all kind of that goofy green that the Swedes are fun, get a hard on over. And then we're at the Holiday Inn on the Key Bridge. And he said, well, I'm going to head on back. If I time it right, I can get across the bridge before the traffic starts. So Miller and I are sitting at the bar, and we're watching the TV, and there's a shot of the Key Bridge going across, and it's bumper to bumper stopped. So everybody's out, and there's an accident up here. It looks like it's going to be a while. And he said, but we did spy this man. And they zoomed in, and there it was, the Saab, with Rob laying on the hood with his shirt off, sunglasses on, his pant legs rolled up over his knees, and that, taking a sunbathe.
Who else but Captain Rob? Wow.
Good man, very, very good man. I'm very sad in his passing. Love his wife, the nuclear elf.
What a man. I've heard a lot about him. Galil Hub would like to know, looking back, what piece of captured enemy intelligence or gear that you or your unit found turned out to be the most vital to operations across the fence?
Well, probably that wiretap, the 18 hours of that wiretap that we got, because there was a new division that had moved into the area, and they were bringing armor up, and that was all on the wiretap. And that fucking device that Cookie found. The guy knew the nomenclature to every bit of Soviet hardware, knew who made it, who the foreman was at the collective of the factory, had all these little facts in his little Ranger library. But that thing was a relay unit to coordinate anti-aircraft guns. The 37 millimeter side pans that looks like a big insect when it folds out. The tires kind of collapse and become the base, and then the twin thing. Then there's a fire control system that coordinates them, and that box was exactly it. It was between the 3 positions, up above them, and that's what we found out. It was coordinating the fire for all of them, because they're side pan radar on those things.
Wow. I never realized, besides of course being a Ranger qualified, that Cookie was served a prior tour at BUDOP, the Special Forces camp.
Robert E. Cook. First of all, don't call him Cookie to his face. or you're
Oh,
liable to get hurt. Okay. Second of all, he got the name not because of his name, because I think Mac might have coined it, but it could have been him too. He's always going Robert Cook, the cookie that doesn't crumble. So we just started calling him Cookie after that. He's Bob was professional right down, to his. I think he actually, made sure his turds were all the same size and that. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Good soldier. He went after the war. He ended up in, I think, the 19th Special Forces as a team sergeant. Last time I saw him on any kind of deployment, and I think he might have made sergeant major. But he retired as a high school history teacher in Vidalia, Georgia.
wow. Sweet Vidalia. Gotta get the Vidalias. Damn, well, what a great damn. I wish I would have had him as a history teacher. Could you imagine having a SOG
I bet
man?
nobody slept in that class.
Oh God, no. Hell, woo, hell no.
Yeah,
Bayou
he
State
tried
out.
before he became a high school teacher. He tried working for the Fish and Game, and I guess two poachers drew down on him and found out that was a bad idea. So they had to let him go at Fish and Game, and he went and became a high school history teacher.
Damn, what a bad mistake for that hunter to pull on Mr. Cook. Good God. Bayou State Outdoors. I'm amazed how the NVA could find a 6 or 7 man team in total darkness in the middle of thick jungle in Laos, completely silent in a RON perimeter. Do you think they zeroed in on your radio, or how do you think they found teams?
Most of the time, they found you through elimination. At some point, you made a mistake. You bruised a plant and it left a sign, and the trackers picked it up. Or somebody saw you, woodcutters heard you, glanced you. But by process of elimination, they towards 70 and 71, towards the end, and that they had complete units that were nothing but counter recon, and they were mostly NCOs, seasoned troops. They'd use the green troops to get online and sweep down to an area, trying to scare you out of the bushes and start a firefight. But once they got you where they could move on you, the worst thing you could do was go to ground. You stop moving, you're dead. You need to be ground. You need to pick your terrain that you can stay alive in long enough for air support to get in to support you, to move you to a location where they can extract you, or blow the trees down and try and come out through that hole. But they found us through elimination. They had, remember this, they were living out there. It wasn't like they were in a camp over in Thailand and came in for the weekend and did their military. They were living out there, tunnel systems, truck parks, big bivouac areas with bunkers and bomb trenches and all that. So they were out there all the time. And you live in the bush, you get tuned to the bush. Eventually, you'll be able to pick up those little signals that say something's nearby and it's not friendly. So that's mostly how they found us then. Their RDF capabilities on the ground in a tactical sense and that pretty limited. I don't think they were picking up because all our transmissions were UHF and VHS. So, it was they had to, and it was real short. I mean, they could key on Covey, but they probably couldn't key on us because Covey's up there winging around in a little sports car, and we were on the ground in that. So, I don't think they found us that much by RDF. We had a leak. That Navy guy Walker was feeding information to the NVA about SOG missions and that. Mac and I actually had a target that got canceled. We got up to Quang Tri and Boudreaux goes, I don't know how you arranged this. I know you're behind it too, but your mission's been canceled. Hanoi Hannah was on the radio going, oh, Sergeant Brokhausen and Sergeant McLaughlin, we'll be waiting for you at Hilltop 1776. It was our primary LZ. So obviously somebody had been slipping. I think eventually they caught a guy down in Saigon, Vietnamese. He got the Hero of the Revolution award from the North in the end, but he was funneling information to him. It wasn't as airtight as everybody liked to think it was. And for that reason, we never gave the launch site our true remain overnight position. It was always offset, and they knew it was offset. They just didn't tell Saigon or Da Nang that we weren't reporting it. And a lot of times those positions got attacked in the night when we were sitting off a couple thousand meters away on a hilltop watching it. But then we weren't there.
The false LZs and the RON positions. I mean, I remember Mr. Lynn Black telling me on the phone that he started doing that in 68 and 69, that,
Oh,
that it was that
and then
big of an issue.
all that lore got passed down 1-0 to 1-0 to 1-0 as you came on. I mean, I was using stuff that guys told me about they'd been using in 68. Well, like taking a soap dish claymore and wrapping it, or just taking a claymore itself and putting coat hangers on it so you could throw it up in the branches of a tree, run out to the end of the wire and hit it. So you now got an air burst going down at whoever's behind you. And of course, Wesley was always coming up with death rays made out of explosives. And boy, it was loony around explosives.
Yet another interesting character in the book, and several we're gonna have to ask about if questions don't come up. But there's quite a few here building up. What was the most or least impressive improvised indigenous weapon that you encountered? I don't know if y'all were coming across punji pits or anything like that with the NVA.
We came across, wash tub claymores where they take a 55-gallon drum and turn it into, fill one side of it with nuts, bolts, and jagged scrap, and then pack either French C3 or dynamite behind it. Be sitting out there facing a trail. You set that thing off, it'll clear the trail back 100 meters of everything. Not too much Malaysian. Some punji pits and some Malaysian, some spring booby traps. Most of the time, the booby traps you come across would be around a tactical position that they were in, that they had just set up. But nobody left that stuff around for long. I mean, just like when you put down a toe popper behind you, remember you're not coming back down that path because you'll never be able to remember where it was. So it just stayed there until somebody stepped on it and blew it up, or a roe deer or some other critter stepped on it and detonated it.
Damn.
Gentlemen, I'm going to walk outside with the phone because after this sip of water, because I want to have a cigar.
Perfectly fine, sir. Perfectly fine.
So if the picture gets a little shaky, don't worry.
We'll hold tight. That's absolutely fine, sir.
Talking. I mean, I just.
Oh yeah.
I figure I can have a cigar and talk to you guys at the same time.
All righty. Yeah. Our next question. People are curious about. Did y'all ever get any info before, like when y'all captured a POW on the ground? Did y'all get info out of them yourselves before y'all turned them over for them to be interrogated?
Oh, you haven't got time to interrogate anybody. You're busy trying to get him someplace where you can get out of there with him. You might slap him around and ask him, who's ahead of you or something like that, but you're not going to have time to do any kind of real interrogation. All that'll be handled once he gets to the launch site. They pick him up there and then they start processing. The most valuable prisoner ever gotten out of CCN was captured by Elden Bargewell. Guess what the guy did for a living?
Was he the mail carrier or?
No, he was the regimental cook.
Oh.
He was the one that knew everybody in the regiment because he had their meal card and had to order their rations for them. So he knew everybody. I mean, that's Major Twang. He's 42 years old. He eats like a horse. He had all this info. about the personalities, what the tactical situation. Because anytime they move, he had to move first and get the mess set up for them to move into.
Oh,
Yeah, he was a
wow.
cook.
That's I can only imagine the information the guys got out of them down when he got to Saigon. That's did y'all have a lot of prisoners captured in y'all's
No,
time frame? It
no,
seemed pretty hard
no,
in
no, no,
okay.
no. We got the one guy that Kuman cut loose, and that
Oh
was,
God.
you know, and we couple other failed ambushes and that, trying to get one. And they either too shot up or whatever, that things went bad. We couldn't get them out. But trying to grab somebody by stealth is that's a totally different ball game.
Wow. Damn. Kyle's curious, what do you consider personally the most important trait, physically or mentally, to be a SOG recon man?
No brains, no headaches.
Simple enough.
You know, people ask me then years afterwards, so what kind of special school did you have? What was the selection for going into project? Basically, your press gang by peer pressure. No, there's definitely. Let me get rid of him. There, I got rid of him. All right. He's out there flogging his whiskey in Tennessee. Yeah. You know, somebody said, well, what kind of special school? Well, we had 1-0 school, which was run by former 1-0s for 1-0s. And that was done a long time. But other than that, it was just another special forces assignment. It was voluntary. That was the only thing that was different. You could quit. You know, and the job isn't cut out for everybody. The job's tough, and it's stressful, and it helps if you're a little daft, you know. But I think everybody. I never met anybody who was stupid who ran recon. I mean, most of the guys had above average in you know IQ, and they had committed themselves to. I'm going to roll the dice every time I go on the ground, but I'm going to get this job done. And it was perseverance, skill, and luck. And skill and luck have got to be there on the same day.
Yeah, there's several hell that time y'all get injured or I think you get injured on the after
Oh,
RT Kansas, and that's one hell of a little bit of luck and a hell of a lot of skill that when y'all put up the claymores and Max coming back and forth and all of that, that's one of the more hairier ones that y'all got put in on.
man. You know, I spent my entire career in Vietnam picking him up after he tripped over something. That boy tripped over everything in Vietnam. And usually when he tripped over something, I'd reach down to pick him up and somebody would shoot at me. That's how we found the coaxial cable. We've been looking for it for like 2 days. And he tripped over it, fell down this gully. That's how we found him.
God, oh,
Yeah. He
that
can deny that all he wants, but that's the God's honest truth.
oh, that's hilarious.
You got to remember
Daniel's
that Cook was the adult on the team.
I remember him scolding y'all quite a bit in the book.
No, that was Kuman.
Well, him too. But I think
Cook was always scolding us, counseling us. You know, Ranger conference. Going to have a Ranger conference over here.
the look he'd give, especially, I think you quoted as once or twice when he'd glare back at y'all with that look he'd give y'all.
Oh yeah, well, he only had one eyebrow, went all the way across his forehead.
It's a tactical eyebrow.
Oh yeah.
One of the viewers is curious, what kind of cigars are you smoking?
Cheap ones.
Cheap ones.
They're some kind of Cuban blend. I've got a cigar shop I go to down here that's run by a former Iraqi police captain
Whoa.
who came over here, oh God, 20 years ago. He immigrated to the United States. A really nice guy. His name is Hadir, which means warrior. He had met my grandfather, Willem. Him and a bunch of, devils that hung around with him. They'd all survived World War One.
Ooh,
And they
rough,
got a government check once a month, and that was his money. Didn't belong to the grandma. Doesn't belong to May. It was his money. And they would, when that check came in, they'd go to town and buy themselves a jug of whiskey and some White Owl cigars, and they'd sit on the back porch and finish that bottle of whiskey until my grandmother ran them all off with a broom. Get out of here, you scallywags.
I've seen and heard stories of my grandmother getting off after my grandfather with the broom. As a matter of fact, I may have.
I talked him into buying a surplus post office tricycle, Harley Davidson, and he used that. He had a bunch of apartment buildings in Fargo, North Dakota, and he would go around and collect the rent on that motorcycle. Didn't matter what the weather was. It could be a blizzard out. He'd be riding that motorcycle. My grandmother wouldn't even talk to me for almost a year after she found out I was the one that talked him into getting it. Go ahead, Grandpa. You deserve it.
Oh my goodness. People are gonna have already asked about would this happen to be the grandfather that passed on the helmet to you that you used in Vietnam?
No, that was a family heirloom from an uncle.
Ah, okay, okay. Because people were going to beat me over the head if I didn't dare ask about
my mother
the helmet.
Sent it over to Vietnam for me as a care package. Showed up at Recon Company. I got this big care package. Of course, the yards know about your care packages when they hit Saigon. They know you got goodies that have arrived from home. And she sent me my Luger, my German helmet, and 2 big boxes of Cheerios and some, pound cake. Nobody eats cake. Even the Montagnards would need pound cake. And you come back with it, whoosh, number 10, number 10,000. Yeah. So I took the whole package. I went over to the mess hall with breakfast. And I ceremoniously pulled out that huge box of Cheerios because we used to get the dry cereal in the little one bowl packets. And they always had shit like grape nuts and, crap. None of the good stuff in that. So I had her send me, it was a box of cornflakes too. And I was pouring out the Cheerios and the barrel of the Luger fell out of the box into my bowl just as Manus walked up to the table. Let me tell you something, my man. There's something illegal going on here. Really? Shit.
Thank goodness he didn't want that thing for himself and was a good guy because I can see somebody else snatching that thing up from you.
No, I ended up, the MPs tried to, they were going to confiscate it going out of country and that. And I knew that the guys had gone down through there and they were just taking anybody you had a Tokarev pistol, the little prick MPs down at the repo depot would confiscate it and tell you, well, you could file paperwork to get it back when you get to the state. Bullshit, So I ended up giving the Luger to I think to Bop or Loy, one of the two. It might have been Bong.
I think it was Bong.
Bong, yeah. He loved that gun because he'd been in Force 36 with the Legionnaires when he was a 15-year-old striker back in the 50s, when Dien Bien Phu. So he loved that gun. I gave him the Luger and I gave my Tomahawk to Sampat.
Wow. I think I'm trying to. I wish I had some photos of all of the. I do actually. I'm trying to bring up. How old was Kuman or Bong the oldest Montagnard that y'all had that was on the team?
Bong.
Okay.
Bong was in his late 40s, early 50s, and he could walk the legs off of a goat. He was one tough son of a bitch. Bong was.
Holy hell! That's the oldest I think I've ever heard from talking to anybody about them having, but hell, if he was fighting with the French Foreign Legion, then yeah,
He
Jesus,
was
wow.
he was 15 in 1954. So this is 70. So 54 to 70 is 16, 15 and 16. So he was about 40 years old, or maybe 30, late 30s. You can't tell with Orientals. They all look like they're, I mean, look at Carl Franklin. You'd swear up and down he's in his early 30s and that. And he was 2 days older than Rock.
I love that. Speaking of Mr. Carl, before we get to some viewer questions, I've been wanting to hear about this man, other than the Cuban. But could you speak about? I've got the photo of Mr. Al Jerpo. I can't pronounce his last name. Andre Smith, Melvin Hill, and Joe Walker up on the screen. Could you speak a little bit about Mr. Andre and what he was like?
Andre. Andre had a lot of anger issues. Well, he was a, who was the other guy down in Central? Ranger Melvin, and they were cut from the same cloth. You know, Andre abused his yards. I thought, yeah, you know, I liked Andre, but I didn't like him. You know how he treated the yards and some of the other stuff he did. We had boxing smokers where we'd box in the sand out there, and Andre always wanted to pit himself up against somebody the size of McLaughlin. And in fact, he went after McLaughlin in the club one night, and McLaughlin took a garbage can and pushed it down over his head and took a mop handle and beat on the outside of it until he started crying on the inside. Now Andre's a good man, good SF guy. Just his temperament was a bit different. He was like that. Bolton was like that too. Bolton was always firing his team and hiring a new one. But him and Pulley ran some good missions with that group. But everybody's got their own way of managing things. I felt an affinity for the Montagnards. I had grown up in Minnesota, next to the big reservation and that. So indigenous peoples were not that strange to me. In fact, the correlation between the Montagnards and the Indians in this country was pretty evident. They were animists. They were basically a Iron Age tribe that we trundled in there and gave them all these man tools, and it was natural for them. They're a warrior society.
It always amazes me how quick the guy, or how quick they pick up. Well, they've already had battlefield experience before they get to y'all, but it's always amazing how quick they vibe and mesh and gel with. Well, I guess it's not always, but when you do get on a team and get it running smoothly, it's amazing to see how, from reading and hearing about how well y'all mesh together and become a unit.
Well, the yards were everything. Kuman and Tua had equal standing with us. We were the Americans that they depended on for their pay and for the missions and to stay alive. And the yards were how we stayed alive. And Kuman and Tua ran the team. Mac's job was to stay on the radio, keep in contact with Covey, get us the air support we needed, and Cook and my job was to fight the team as a unit. So, and it was after a while, you constantly did immediate action drills when you were back at Da Nang. You'd go to the range, usually a couple of days or the day after you got into isolation. You'd spend a whole day on the range, grenades, CAR-15s, machine guns, the little mortars, anything that we were carrying for firepower, we could fire down there on the range because there was nobody between us and Marble Mountain. It was just big dead area down there. There had been rice paddies there at one time, but it was just mostly sand. So, but the team worked like a single-celled animal. Everybody knew where they had to go. We all had our drills. We knew, that when we were moving in a certain direction, we would change we would change formation based on the vegetation and the terrain. And it never took prompting from us to get them to move into formation or change formation. It was an automatic thing.
That's how long did it take? I mean, I guess it's pretty immediate from the book, but how long did it take for you to get really meshed with the guys on HABU, Americans and your yards?
By,
Pretty
by, by,
immediate.
by the time the first mission was over.
Wow.
I mean, the Cherry mission was, the one where, I thought it was a ball buster, and Mac told me later, said that was that was just a tryout.
That's one of the better parts. It's like, good Lord, what have I gotten myself into here?
Oh no, I pretty much knew by that time what I'd gotten myself into, and how am I going to get out of this without appearing to be a pussy. By the way, the root word for that is pusillanimous, which means somebody that acts in an effeminate or a weak way. It had nothing to do with the female anatomy.
Learned a new vocabulary word today. I've written that one down right there. Wow. Did you ever get to hear from any of the yards after you left Vietnam, or find out what happened to any of them?
Yeah, I went back to Vietnam twice after the war. I got up as far as Mylock, but at that time they were still military controlled area, and I ran into trying to think of his name. You can see his face. I can't think of his name right now. He was the other thump gunner. There was Bop, and I think his name was Tien. I ran into him in Da Nang, and he recognized me and did a little hand wave like, "Don't come over to me right now." And I followed him and cornered him down by the riverfront there, and he told me he'd been in an education camp for like 6 years before they finally released him.
Jesus Christ. And I've got a question that'll come up later about that, about when everything starts to shut down before we close out. But here's a question about Kuman. Jedediah is asking from another SOG man gave an interview that he remembers all the brew at the CCN compound looked up to a member on Team HABU because he was a Montagnard Prince. Is that Kuman? Is that true? Prince. I think he may be a battle chief.
Well, Mac always said, Mac married, what was her name? She was one of the waitresses there at the Recon Club. And he always told everybody, "She's my Montagnard princess." Sure. But they were structured more like, what's a good analogy? They were structured like the dog soldiers of the Crow. Each longhouse and they had warrior societies within the tribe, and each one, basically the members of that society slept together, except for the married guys that had families and that, but the bachelors all slept in one loghouse for each society. And that's how I equated them, with basically an analogy with the North American Indian tribes, because they were very much alike.
Yeah, I enjoy when they talk about, or y'all talk about, watching the spaghetti westerns, and one of the yards quick draws on Mr. Billy.
How come they know use helicopter? They didn't have them then.
Favorite.
The best one was when T.T. Lloyd braced Sergeant Major Waugh on the walkway. We just got done watching Clint Eastwood, The Man with No Name, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And he had fashioned spurs out of coat hangers and had a a GI blanket cut with a hole in the center of it for a serape, and had that long-barreled 45 that Dick Cook originally had given it to Bang, and he had that in a cheap, Vietnamese plastic holster, and that. And told Billy why he had till sundown to get out of town.
Oh man, I
Oh
can
yeah.
only
And the
only
sergeant major, I don't care what you're doing, but get them goddamn yards in line because they think they're goddamn gunfighters. Okay, sergeant major.
Mr. Good Deal himself.
Yeah, Billy was special.
Uh, that that
You
that
know, when he
that
came into the hooch all the time, I used to hold a mirror up to see if his image was in it, just to check.
I remember the story of y'all hiding from him and him lurking around like Count Dracula. I believe you described him as.
I always expected him to show up in a cloud of green, sulfur-smelling smoke.
That is, oh man,
Billy was the only thing Billy wanted was the big blue. If they'd have given him the big blue, you'd have been perfectly happy. I went to his retirement party in Fort Bragg. Yeah.
that's what Mr. Case said. He wasn't being mean, but he said he avoided Billy like the plague.
Oh
Anytime he
yeah.
saw him,
Yeah,
he
Billy
got
would
the
always
hell
try and
out.
get you roped into a good deal. But the thing is with Billy, Billy would go on that good deal with you.
Oh, yeah.
The last thing you wanted was Billy on that good deal with you. Not because he was ineffectual or inefficient. He just had big balls. He like when in the second book, the Christmas Mission with Keith Larson, uh,
Now,
Montgomery, McGowan,
M-
McGowan,
McDowell, I think, isn't it?
McGowan. Yeah, almost 6 foot of cage dynamite. Yeah, red hair. They went on a mission with Jesse Campbell was the 1-0, and it was a static. They got up on the hill. They got in a hellacious firefight, and while they were bombing everything in the valley below, calling in airstrikes on it. And out of the woods trundled a T-54 without the barrels on the back for the fuel tanks and that extra fuel, and it hit it with an airstrike and knocked it out of commission. And the traffic between Quang Tri and Da Nang wanted the team to go down off the hill and take pictures and get some stuff off the tank. And I was talking to Keith later. He said we were all praying that Jesse didn't decide to go down there. It said because all the yards were going, well, number 10. We go down there, we die. And they finally talked him out of it. But that's when Murphy threw him the banana knife because he had to go back and refuel. He was out of rockets, so he threw his banana knife out the window. Here, use this till I get back.
I mean, what an absolute cast of characters up there. I mean, God Almighty, that is ridiculous. I've got to get some of these questions for the viewers, or they're gonna absolutely kill me here. What was HABU's? Although you were on two teams, what was your standard operating procedure for entering or finding an RON?
Usually, you started looking for an RON late afternoon, and you'd find the right terrain and the right thicket to get up in someplace, where, like anybody else, you're not going to walk through that particular batch. And then we get inside of it, get set up, get so we could touch each other's toes if possible. Sometimes you couldn't. Sometimes there'd be a slight separation, and try and get in. Try and find a place that got brush cover. Like anybody else, the MVA aren't going to walk through a briar patch. They'll go around it. But you're selecting it for concealment, and you're also selecting it for the way out, and the nearest cleared space beyond that you can use for a rally point if you get hit. So you've got 4 cardinal rally points. You get hit from the north, you go to the east. Get hit from the south, you go to the west. That sort of thing. And it was a team function. And usually it was initiated, got hit, was, Mac would yell out 9 o'clock, 50, 75 meters, whatever. And everybody would, lay down fire and move out in that direction, assemble, and then we'd start moving again, trying to get out. Getting hit in the RO end is the worst kind of nightmare. So the worst feeling in the world is waking up to the sound of hand grenades. Because you're laying in there, you're laying inside, you got your buckle unbuckled, but you're still in your stable rig, leaning against your rucksack, facing out. So if you have to pick up and go, everything's right there with you.
Yeah, that's got to be terrifying, being woken up by either hearing something creeping or just all out grenades being thrown. And uh, several SOG teams, and especially I think in your time frame, that guys got hit on the RON and were completely disappeared, didn't they?
Oh yeah, we lost 3 teams in little over 1 month, just gone. They came up, gave them a team okay, and it's the last time they heard from them. Or they never got to a team okay. They got on the ground, and they started leaving the area and noticed there was a lot of secondary explosions and shit going off on the ground, knowing the team had gotten hit. But nobody came up on the radio. And they go to the emergency freak, because all of us carried an ERT 10. What was the other one? An ERT 77 or something like that. Little pocket radios, emergency radios. Usually they were issued to pilots. And we just used them it had the same thing. It had a beeper on it, locator, and a squad. You could talk on it, short distances. You could talk to Covey on it. And you could use them inside the team sometimes when you're doing stuff.
When y'all get a mission and the map would be given out, and y'all get y'all's AO and the square of map for the AO, was that map square centered on the AO, or did y'all have to move far enough off a predetermined path that you ran out of map?
No, it was a 6x6. No, 6 kilometers by 6 kilometers on a map, a larger map. But you usually folded it, so that was what you were looking at.
Wow, 6x6 then. Okay. Oh, that must have been earlier. How many B-52 strikes normally when an arc light would come in? How much does that consist of? I guess would be the best.
Well, all right. You had 3 ship, 6 ship, 9 ship, and 12 ship B-52 strike arc lights. It's getting foggy. A 6 ship would blow a path of destruction 200 meters wide and 3/4 of a kilometer long. A 12 ship, double that, and everything was gone. When arc light came in there, you had to wait 30 minutes for there to be enough oxygen on the ground to go in and do a BDA. So if you're on the ground, if you're finding anybody, they're really messed up, or they're not that messed up because they were underground, but now they're pissed off. But they had different size arc lights depending on the mission. All that stuff came out of Diego Garcia and Guam, and they get a pedicure on the way over and drink some cocktails and drop bombs all over the place.
Yeah, get their manicure on the way over from Guam.
That's the one. That's the ones.
Someone's got these are 2 good questions. I'm curious about that. Was Robert Cook close friends with Tim Schaff?
With who?
Tim Schaff from RT Crate, the earlier years. I think he was Pappy Boudreaux's 1-1. Is Cook and Schaff friends?
I have no idea.
Okay. Do not know either, Jedediah. I know Mr. Tim, but I've never heard him mentioned Mr. Cook before. I knew this one would come up. Did you ever? They know the Jedediah says he knows we lost George Cottrell, but I wonder if you ever got him back for his part in your time at the morgue.
No. And believe me, I searched for some midget killing hardware. No. George, that, that incident was forgotten within a week because somebody else had done something even more heinous.
About to say, just wait around a day or two, and something else is going to happen that just completely overtakes that.
Yeah, well, Denke was famous for going on stand down and getting thrown out of some particular metropolis like Saigon or Nha Trang and told never to come back and all that. Manus had to report him KIA twice to the provost marshal, just to get him off the hook.
Wow.
Stand down was let your hair down, and it usually only lasted for a couple of days, and you were back in the mill getting ready to do another mission. Supposedly, you were supposed to get 1 day stand down for every night you spent on the ground. But in the end, our total time on the target, like I ran DM10 4 times, and my total accumulated time on the ground was a little over an hour. And they just get on the ground and you're fighting from the point you get off the helicopter until they come and pick your ragged ass up again.
That's unbelievable. That something up is going to come about that, but
we did manage to get in, and we did manage to do recon sometimes. Just that you might run 3 where you got run out, and the next one that came up, you were able to stay for a couple of days.
Man, when on some of these missions, we've not really. I think you're probably really the only person, except for maybe Joe Parnar, SOG medic, to speak about medics and docs per se. Could you talk a little bit about Doc Wang and what it was like to be under his care?
I cannot talk about Dr. Wang without using profanity. Doc Wang, sees. I think let's see if I remember rightly. He grew up in China. His parents were missionaries. I almost said mercenaries, or missionaries, and so he half Oriental and some kind of Hopi medicine man or something like that. He's interesting. At one time he was the top orthopedic surgeon in the United States. He was the head of special surgery at Roosevelt Hospital in New York for years. But Wang was the ultimate professional. He, yeah, this is perfect forum for this. He was running a side business, giving what do they call it when they they cut your tubes.
A vasectomy.
Yeah, he had a vasectomy business on the side.
Ooh.
Where he was giving vasectomies. I watched him give a vasectomy when both the patient and he were loaded up on Manhattans. And in fact, half a recon company was up there in the surgical ward with him at the time for some odd reason. I don't know why. But the doc was a brilliant doctor. And a friend to this very day. And he still spends all his time with me making fun of me in public, if possible. Yeah.
I managed to link up with him after SOAR, and he's quite the individual. Quite the individual. Good man.
Oh, yeah.
Good man for sure. Good man, absolutely.
And I got a couple of adjectives you can add to that.
We've kind of heard about the CCN Covey Riders through all the John Plaster books. Who are the CCN guys as Covey Riders that kind of stick out for you during your time frame?
Dick Cheney, Les Chapman, Dallas Longstreet,
Mm.
yeah. Spider, I think Spider was flying for a while too. But Dick Cheney, if Cheney was flying out of Fubai, I'd do a target out of Fubai because Cheney, big, tall. I think he's a Paiute, big, tall Indian. Real mellow, laid back. Well, I guess we'll just bring in some bombs to help you fellas out. Les Chapman, after the great Battle of the Hilltop and that, he went over to become a Covey Rider. And unfortunately, he fell under the tutelage of Dallas Longstreet, who was a fashion slave. He had all this custom-made black flight suits with all kinds of patches all over. We almost threw him out on the I-Corps bridge one night just to see if the MPs would shoot at him and all that black.
Was Mr. Les, wasn't he teammates with Mr. Jim Butler before he went Covey duty?
Oh, yeah. That was the big fight on the hilltop, was when he got his DSC and Jimmy got a Silver Star. They both should have got, well, actually, Butler should have gotten the Medal of Honor for that. And Les deserved the DSC that he got. I know, because Jimmy made him pull the 292 antenna down, climb up there and put an infrared strobe on the top of it so they could bring in Spectre. And he was whining about it on the radio. I'm not climbing that goddamn pole one more time. They were shooting at him from across the valley with a 57 recoilless rifle. Kept pinging their position with that, and they were trying to get Stinger or Spectre to come in there and put a little hurt on him, which they eventually did. But right after that, he went up to fly Covey up at Quang Tri.
I just recently got his book and was flipping through and saw him talking about that incident and how chaotic it was.
It was chaotic, I'll give it that.
Mr. Mike Bravo, what was your favorite piece of kit that you carried during your time in SOG, and why is that?
Favorite. That's a tough one. I love the Car 15. It never failed on me. It was always the thing about the Car 15, you carry enough ammo. You're carrying anything that's 7.62, pretty soon you're going to reduce the amount of ammo you can carry on yourself. When I carried the RPD, everybody on the team carried an extra belt of ammunition for it. And I had, belts and drums on me. But the Car 15, I'd have normal load, 1, 2, 3, 4 canteen covers with 6 magazines each. 5 20-round magazines and 1 30-round magazine in the center, so you could grab it. Once you got one of them loose, the others came out fairly easily when you needed them. And I carried 6 30-round magazines and an AK vest on that. So I'm 4 times 5 times 20, 100 rounds per, so 400 rounds, 430 or 400 and 520 rounds plus 630 rounds, another 180 rounds there, and extra bandoliers in the rucksack for the Car 15. And then of course I carried either a sawed-off shotgun or the little sawed-off M79 and a pistol.
Jesus Christ. Where did you get your idea for taking out the shells and putting the Vietnamese coins inside shells for your shotgun?
Wesley.
Of course.
Wesley. Wesley's another Covey Rider. Yeah, went up there to be buzzing around his little aerial sports sports band.
He seems like he would have been the type of Covey Rider to start throwing stuff out of the window, homemade bombs and stuff.
Well, he did. He took 60mm mortar rounds and took the bore writing safety pin out of them. Then there's a pin spring loaded on the side of the warhead. When you drop it down the tube, and the shotgun cartridge in the center ignites and then ignites all the charges and that. As that round comes out of the tube, it springs loose and that pin comes out. Now that you got a bomb, if you touch that, it had like a little button on the front of it for point detonating. And you guys, can you excuse me just for a second?
Yeah. I think I actually need to take a piss real quick myself.
That's exactly where I'm headed.
Yep, guys, y'all hold on a second. I'm about to use the bathroom as well. Nick, we'll meet right back.
Okay. Hi. That was just for all you sports fans. One of you might want to go check on Bud, make sure he didn't fall in.
Woo! Holy hell.
Evidently not.
Damn, I apologize about that. That cheap Crown Royal will hurt a man if you don't watch out.
Too early in the day for that for me.
It's I'm an hour early. It's 4 o'clock somewhere.
Oh Jesus, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Wow.
Wow, this is introspective right here. I'll be anxious to hear your answer for this one. Mike Bravo's curious, what was the most difficult lesson you learned during the Vietnam War? Looking back, what advice would you give a younger Nick Brokhausen at that time?
Join the Navy. What particular weapon was hard to learn?
No, what was the most difficult lesson you learned during the Vietnam War?
Never stop fighting. Even when it's impossible and it looks like you're going to perish, never stop fighting.
That's damn good advice right there, and a lot of people could use that for our everyday life. Don't give up. Don't give up. Someone is curious about, do you have any favorite Vietnamese or yard dishes that you ate while in country?
Oh, pho. I love pho. You know what pho is? It's a soup.
What's in the soup?
Whatever's handy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen it made with pork, made with shrimp, with fish, with beef, with monkey. It's basically the staple of the Vietnamese, and everything's really spicy.
Yeah, that would give me trouble. I'm not a big spicy guy. I'd have trouble there.
You know that Nook Bomb? You ever hear of Nook Bomb?
Oh, yes.
All right. Nook Bomb actually has its origins all the way back to the Roman Empire. The Romans used a fish sauce. I should never remember the name. Derma or something like that, but it was fermented fish that they used as a sauce, and it was, if you ran out of that fish sauce, civilization collapsed. So the that particular type of a sauce that dates all the way back to the Roman Empire. Just like the Yards have in their lore, their verbal stories of the past and that have them hunting elephants with long hair.
Jesus Christ.
The
Is the
Dagan
note?
people originally came from somewhere up in China, and eventually bigger, stronger tribes pushed them further and further south till they ended up in the peninsula down there, going into Vietnam and in the highlands, and that's where they eventually settled in that. But the Dagan people are a very interesting history in that. I used to have a book that somebody swiped it from me at a party. It was a field manual, those yellow vanilla books that the military puts out, FM 31-5, that shit. And it was all about the different tribes. What were their taboos? What did they believe about marriage? What did they believe about death? All that sort of stuff. What their native costumes were between the different tribes, and that. The great book. It's still in print. Some guy named Ryan Peterson, who's a modeler, the guy who made the model of me with the German helmet,
Mm-hmm.
the first ever action figure from CCN. Remember that, guys? I remember when Elden Bargewell, I caught so much flack over that thing. He sent me a picture, and he sent it to a couple of those other meatheads, and they put it out all over Facebook and that, that little 1 foot tall miniature of me with the helmet on and that. And Eldon called me up, and I was talking to him. He goes, "So you have an action figure now?" I said, "Don't start. Don't start."
Well, I mean, he's not much worse, because I wish he was around to see it. There's one of him now, and I've got the picture to where he's got maybe your RPD, or maybe it's his, and he's got your helmet on in front of a chopper. I was curious.
That picture of him, I got a better picture of him standing on that fucking static after, everybody got in and they started shooting at everybody. And I used to use it as blackmail material. This picture could get out, your chances of making that second star are going to be pretty slim. He goes, "I got a lot of land out here, and I know where to get a backhoe."
He did. He was right down probably 15 minutes down the road from where I was, or from where I am right now. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I hated that afternoon.
What's the name of the town he lives in? It's not Vidal.
Eufaula.
Huh?
Eufaula.
Eufaula. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excuse my twang. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, no. I spent 2 years in Alabama with McGlother, and I'm pretty much a nerd to it by now.
I love that. Speaking of Mr. Eldon, what that mission to where you're in the book, you're coming to,
That
and
was that static.
okay, and the bullet magnet, I forgot who the bullet magnet is. That was
Davidson,
Davidson.
the varmint.
Were they a bright light sent in for y'all, or was that the?
No,
Were
we
they
were all there together, and I was actually strap hanging, I think, on that one, and it was Davidson's team, him and Waggy Cobra. I think it was RT Cobra, and Eldon was strap hanging. Kind of they add an adult to the mix there, and but that's the way the thing opened up was Davidson fell down the hill. He was trying to put an M60 in place. The statics usually were old fire bases, where they put a battery of 105s in on top of a hill, and then put an infantry platoon in there to protect them, and then go shoot the crap out of everything within 13 kilometers. And then that we would go into those old abandoned fire bases and just basically shore them up, tighten up the perimeter, and that sit up there and call in airstrikes on anything moving that we could observe from the hilltop. This particular one was right at a junction of the road system that turned right and went off into Laos. And I think it was west of Da Nang. We launched out of the Da Nang, the temporary launch site that they set up there because the weather was all socked in up in Booby. They couldn't get anybody in or out, because of the monsoons.
Those played hell on y'all. I've just been finally hearing about just how bad monsoon can get. Talking to one of the CCC guys that got stuck out there 11 days and came back with the worst case of trench foot that anybody at the medical center had ever seen. I mean, his feet were just god awful.
Now, I always took real good care of my feet for just that reason. When everything else fails, you've got the Shoe Leather Express to get in and out.
How on a mission? I don't think we've ever really asked about that, but on a mission, what can y'all do, guys? There's Coy Reese and Davidson on screen right there. How can y'all? I mean, there's not much you can do during a mission, but when you get back home or to the compound, do y'all are y'all powder and feed? Or y'all putting anything on it to keep them?
First thing you do is take a shower. When you get back and get cleaned off, and then you want to dry off. 'Cause, 2 or 3 days in the wet, and every bit of skin on you is wrinkled because you're just soaked all the time. You're down there. If you're down in triple canopy, everything above you is dripping on you. And if you're not in triple canopy, you're getting pounded by rain that actually comes from the ground up.
The Forrest Gump rain, as we call it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What's your opinion on on isolation? It seems like CCN was really the only one that actually took it serious and did it. What was that whole situation like going into isolation for a mission?
Well, first of all, I think that all women should be put in isolation until they're 48. That way they've calmed down and got all that anger out of them. Isolation was necessary. That's where you could totally focus on the mission. There was no distraction. You got all your intel reports in. You looked at the target. You looked at where people had gone in, how they had failed, how they got run out. Come up with some sort of plan to get some longevity on the ground. And it was by the time you were ready to go to the launch site, you knew in your mind you had studied those maps so much that you actually knew the map, so you could find yourself on the ground without having to pull out the map. And all the other stuff about enemy. I remember one time, right after we lost those 3 teams, they had a bunch of folks from Central came up because we were going to ask them to start running our southern targets. And we were tapped out. We were down to a third of our strength at that time. And they came up and they took one look at when you lay the map up there, then you start laying the clear overlays on that show the enemy units and where they're at. And pretty soon you can't see the contour lines because there's so many enemy units in it. They got back on their 130 and went back to Khartoum. No slight on them. It's just, that our targets were hot all the time.
I was gonna try and wait for this to come up because it's such a hard issue to talk about. But could you kind of allude to that? How, I mean, David Davidson was a very accomplished 1-0 at CCS. I think he had somewhere upwards of 60 missions in Cambodia, and they go north, and they didn't make the transition and
he tried to run like he did down south. Down south is a totally different enemy presence than up north. The way it worked out is that as they came down into South Vietnam, we bled them. And when they got past us, they got to Central, and we bled them some more. And Central bled them as well. and from the ones coming in from the west from Laos, and that was the central NVA headquarters was right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of their AO. What they call it, crosswind or something like that.
Cosman, yes, sir.
Yeah, and then when they finally got down south, you had the boat people, I called them. The people that came up from the Mekong and spread out into the countryside, and Central worked on them in different terrain. Down south in the CCS, it was mostly wet
Wow.
and grasslands, and then it finally got into jungle and finally into some mountainous terrain. Central was mostly all mountainous terrain, and our targets were mountainous terrain out onto the plain. But that spine of mountains that runs west and then finally across the northern portion of the demilitarized zone was our targets. But Baby Son came up. See, he could slip out of his perimeter and go check something out and get away with it. You slip out of the perimeter up north, you're going to disappear. It just wasn't done. We moved as a group. We fought as a group. None of this trying to get slick. And then what happened with Baby Son, he tried to use the same tactics he'd gotten away with so many times down south, and it just killed him. Because you got to remember this: the NVA were always on the learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're living out there. They're not going back to a base, somewhere and relaxing and what have you. They're out there 24/7.
They were very adept at adapting to the situation. They knew, get on your belt buckle as quick as possible because the air is going to kill them. So when you got rushed with intent to overrun you. It wasn't a probe. They totally different tactic. And each of the areas, Central's tactics that they were facing were slightly different from ours, but South was really different from ours.
We've had you about 2 hours. I don't want to keep you too much longer. There are a few questions, and then I was going to wind it up with asking a little bit about the Cuban. But these next few questions are pretty good on what we've been talking about. Alex was curious, in your personal opinion, what did you think was the most effective air support that SOG Recon men had?
Oh, the A1E, the Sky Raiders. The Sky Raiders and the gunship, Cobra, and of course Spectre. Spectre. If you can get Spectre over you, you had a wall of fire starting at 5 meters out, and working their way wherever they're. That gun platform was the best in the world for its time. And the Sky Raiders, they can carry their own weight and bomb, and they can hang around forever. Big old prop engine truck up there will drop bombs for you, CBUs, and come back and strafe them on the way back.
And get low enough for y'all for them to tip their hats at you. I've heard also. I mean, low.
Yeah, the A1E pilots are a special breed. I mean, I remember seeing them up so close you could see the expressions on their face, read their lips in some cases. They would bring it down. The difference, here's the difference. Air Force, fast movers, you're going to get them. The Phantom pilots would get down there and get dirty. The best ones were the Marines. The Marines would come back with foliage in their intake. A lot of times the Air Force, they wouldn't get down real low on a bombing run. Depend on what bomb group you got, or what squadron. But the Covey's ordering up anything that's in the air, and anything that they pre-planned that they've got, bombed out. Hold on.
Wow.
Jeez, everybody wants to call me this afternoon.
We've had you a long time. We're about to be done because I know they're probably getting pissed off at you not answering the phone.
I don't worry about that. They're pissed off because they got a problem, not me.
Let's see. Oh, Alex, another good question. What's your proudest moment in SOG? Well, in service. It doesn't necessarily have to be SOG related.
Uh, my time at CCN, really. That I mean, Berlin had its moments, but really the job, the mission, the people, the experience of running reconnaissance, and that was I I fit the peg, and could match the hole, and it was comfortable doing it. I knew how to do it. I knew I could count on the people that were with me to make sure we could get it done, and they're closer to me than my family is in many cases.
Yeah, I mean the bonds. I mean it's every time I talk to a SOG man, and any time their teammates come up. I mean, and especially being at SOAR. I mean, it's like y'all just pick up where y'all left off. It's almost like y'all haven't been separated for 50 years. I mean, it's
So,
wild to
and we
see.
we make shit up too. Well, lots of it. You remember when that $500 and the Rolex that you promised me? Get a little lean here.
Oh man, that's one thing I'll never forget. I enjoyed getting to spend that time with y'all that week. That's something I'll cherish forever. That's that week at SOAR.
Well, I'm gonna say this in all honesty. You guys, you and Jason Hardy, Jason Collins, yourself, and the others that run these sites and that, well, first of all, we weren't the giants of the battlefield that everybody wants to make us out to be. We were special forces that were given a mission and we accomplished it. Simple as that. It was at the time, I really didn't start feeling really special until I got back to Fort Devens. And well, actually, when I got reassigned after Vietnam to the sixth group, and I went to report in on a Friday, and I'd gone through my 201 file, removed any Article 15s or any kind of trash that might hold me down. I took my packet in, gave it to the sergeant major, B company sergeant major. At that time, they had companies instead of battalions, and the sergeant major says, "Well, you got to come back on Monday. The old man's going to want to meet you and interview you." I go out, have a good time for the weekend, come back Monday morning, walk into the office, and he gets up. He goes, "Come on, we're going up to group headquarters." I said, "For what?" He said, "The old man doesn't want you." "What do you mean he doesn't want me? He hadn't even met me, and I know there's no Article 15s in there because I ripped them out." Yeah. Hey, he goes, "No, no, no. Yeah, he doesn't want you. You're going to have to find a new job, new home." Lucky for you, there's one company where people like you end up in, and that's where you're being reassigned. And I said, "Why didn't he want me?" He goes, "Well, everybody knows that people from projects are either sociopaths, psychos, or drunk. And apparently you're sober. So that makes you the other category." So I
A, ra-
had to go find a new job.
a raging
It was
psychopath.
strange coming from him because I knew him. He'd been in the train when I'd been up at CCN and on his third tour. Yeah, I said, "Well, thanks a lot, Sergeant Major." "No, we got the perfect place for a rascal like you." And I got the company commander was a little short Filipino named De Gracia, Major De Gracia. He's, all of maybe 5'4", 5'5", skinny as a rail, and he had snakes. He loved
Oh,
snakes. He had snakes in his office, snakes in his car, snakes everywhere. And his sergeant major was a guy named Louis Brown, who looked like a fire plug with a face on it. Little short, he originally jumped into Corregidor in a
oh,
heavy machine gun company when they jumped into the to the to the polo field. on the island. He landed. He was carrying the receiver, and it took him 25 minutes to find somebody with a barrel to finally get the gun in operation. And the Japs were all shooting down the trees, shooting guys that missed the stables and ended up in the jungle below. They were. That was the command structure of B Company at the time. And Digger was a real character. He had survived the death march. He'd been a Filipino scout when Corregidor fell, and he survived the Bataan death march.
Hell, what a rough, not individual he had to be.
I had a friend of mine, how was it? Not Isola. I could see his face, can't remember his name in that. He had a wolf. He lived in the barracks. He had a wolf and a Burmese python in his room. And he went to the field, and he left one of the barracks rats instructions on how to feed the wolf and the snake with the chickens that were also in the room. And the guy went to feed him, and the wolf had gotten out of the cage and had eaten the python and the chickens.
Oh.
And he was out in the field, and they came and got him. You have to go back and, he became Marlon Perkins for about 2 months. I used to see him running down the main street going up the 82nd Airborne in the wood line with that wolf on a chain. And the only thing that saved him was because De Gracia had all those snakes. It quietly got swept under the rug. How could they prosecute him when every time you turned around, you were finding one of Major De Gracia's snakes, either in your bed or in the sink or wrapped around the toilet?
You got SF men, but especially SOG men and snakes. I mean, didn't Andre Smith have a big python there that y'all had?
We had George, and George actually belonged to, I want to say, Cottrell, because he always had the damn thing wrapped around him somewhere. He'd go over and leave it in your hooch, and you'd go crawl in bed, and there's this thing laying in there. And it was when Dockin got his hand blown off, we took the snake down to the evac hospital, and it was wrapped around his neck and came out his arm where his arm had been before. When the nurse came in, she fainted, and we got hustled out of there right after that.
He's got your helmet on too, doesn't he? I've got that picture up.
Yeah, Dockin.
Yeah.
Who later, in another life, he owned a pheasant farm in South Dakota, where you go down and shoot pheasant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which is always good because he was a drummer in a rock band when he joined the Army. Of course, when he got his hand blown off, that career went down the toilet.
And so it took it clean off, the whole thing gone.
Yeah, right at the wrist.
Jesus.
Right at the wrist. Yeah.
God Almighty, I hate hearing that.
Chase was there.
Yeah, he was in the picture. He's holding a plaque behind his head like a crazy person.
Yes. Yeah.
You guys are like an Animal House fraternity. It's unbelievable.
Well, don't get it wrong. It wasn't all about stealing Jeeps and shit like that. It was serious business. And then, we had our moments, but that's just common. I talk to kids all the time, guys like in their 40s, that we're on the rock pile or the sandbox over in Afghanistan or Iraq, and the same personalities are there. The same will and spirit is there. Like I said, special forces is the way of life. It's not just some trite job description. I met a guy who was a team sergeant who had captured Usay and Husey's exotic car collection that was in their AO. They'd been paying their agents through the military. The military intelligence has got a fund that pays for agents to be your intel sources or whatever, and they were getting killed all the time because the place was so leaky. Everybody, the Taliban knew everybody because they had an inside guy or whatever. So when he found the cars, they made a deal with the Kurds, who were the Peshmerga were their troops, just like the Yards were ours, the Peshmerga were theirs. And the Kurds had a very intact auto theft and movement into Europe, long before the Iraq War broke out. And that, so they had all the ways to take that exotic Ferrari and have it arrive in Russia for a client and get it in cash, and they were using that cash then to pay their agents. That way, they circumvented all the cross dressers up at headquarters. So it's the same spirits. Hey, we need cash. Sell these cars. We got cash. We can pay our agents with cash. We don't have to get anybody involved beyond that. So that spirit of getting things done by whatever means necessary, I think is how they put it. Isn't that Rick Prado's book? Isn't that what it's called? By whatever means necessary.
It is actually called Black Ops, but someone does have a book called By Any Means Necessary, and I'm blanking on who the author is.
Whatever. He was
scrounging is still alive and
Coast
well
Guard,
in
and
SF.
he went to work for the post office.
Yeah.
Well, I met a lot of guys from the agency in Vietnam and in later years, and that. It's the old agency back when Gus was a RSO and things like that. They were the generation that actually were human intelligence, and they, that was their job, case officers. And I met a lot of them that were more or less paper shufflers. And then that arena never really appealed to me. First of all, there's a polygraph. That's a no-no. Yeah. We don't do polygraphs. I might blurt something out in my sleep.
Did the CIA guys ever try and come to the compound at CCN, or did they ever shuffle through? Did y'all ever see?
No, they not at the team level. Unless they were doing something that was specific for you, like putting in a sensor package or something. One time we took a major from the Air Force with some kind of fancy rubberized plant that was some kind of new sensor they wanted to place in an exact spot. And there was in isolation, some guy from the agency came by and smoked a cigarette, had a cup of coffee, wished us luck, and was gone.
Agent Smith just shows up and leaves all of a sudden.
Yeah, like I said, we didn't see them all that much. They originally a lot of the projects were like PRU was run by the agency, and then and it was actually, let's see if I remember. It was kind of tied to Fank and kind of not, but it was basically it was a get rid of the cell leaders. That's how you kill a cellular organization, if you identify the cell leaders and you start whacking them until nobody wants to be a cell leader anymore. But it was abused when it was under the agency control because provincial governors were using it to get rid of their political opponent, with our guys pulling the trigger. And then they put it under the military, the army, and it became the Phoenix Project. And then they got some controls on it, did a great job doing what it was designed to do. But when the agency was running it, it got tied up in politics and all that usual gumbo.
We've had a Force Recon lieutenant who went over to run a PRU organization. He said when he first got in, it was a utter clusterfuck, excuse my language, but people were stealing left and right. As you said, settlements were being settled with gunshots and bloodshed. It was just a nightmare.
Well, the agency is extremely fond of young Marine officers for their ground group. I think they call it now. And,
Right.
you know, the guy in Berlin was part of that at one time. Mike Spat.
Yeah.
You know, mostly it after the war, it filled up with SF guys for a while, but then it went back to mostly Marine officers that are in the ground. What do they call it? Ground group, ground project,
Ground
ground project.
branch.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and they do some amazing stuff. It's pyramidal. Just remember that at some point you're going to run into somebody that's going to use your good actions to further his own ambitions at some point.
Absolutely. And speaking of CIA men, and this is a excellent one right here. Did you happen to know Dutch Waranga while you were at CCN, or was he before your time?
I met Dutch once back at Fort Bragg.
Oh,
In passing. It was at the NCO club.
wow. Okay.
The same night we were going to call a bomb scare in for Soul Night.
Oh my God. I met Kim Kipling, the author, at SOAR in 22, and Dutch, I think, had just gotten sick or wasn't able to go attend, and a hell of a book that Kim wrote on Dutch and his time at CCN. I recommend if no one's got that book.
And when
I forgot.
Dutch was a consummate professional. He had survived World War II. He had survived Korea. He had survived Vietnam. He was a wealth of information. Like Wesley. Close your eyes and say the word Sarge. That was Wesley. Wesley was, a combat soldier. First and foremost. And sometimes he was an amusing entertainment if he wasn't blowing something up.
He's definitely one of my four favorite characters in your book. Was Lynn Black had already left CCN by that time, hadn't he?
Yeah, I think Lynn left in 69, 68 or 69.
That's what I thought. And
My time there was from 70 until 72. So, he and Tilt, Maurer, Eldon, all those guys did, and then Pat Watkins, all those guys had been there in 68 when the camp got overrun. So their running years were like 67, 68, 69. I think Tilt had just left there when I got there.
oh wow.
So,
I'd forgot. Yeah, Tilt did too, and I didn't realize how long until sitting here speaking to you and realizing how long Mr. Elden Bargewell spent in country.
but Eldon was our prince. We all aspired someday to be an adult like Eldon.
Was
I
Mike
love the guy.
Taylor in Dead A with you also besides SOG?
I can't remember whether Taylor was at Dead A when I was there or not. I don't think so. I think he was there prior to me, and I know Dick Gross was there. Dick Gross became my team sergeant, and I didn't know he was been at CCN until like 6 months later. We were sitting there talking. Well, I was at CCN. Yeah, where? And, well, I ran on such a team and such. No shit. Why didn't you say something? He said, I didn't want to encourage you.
His son Scott is in the chats with us today. He'll be happy to hear that you knew his old man.
I love Dick Gross. Dick Gross was, like I said, when we beat the shit out of our team sergeant. It's in the book, by the way. We went down for weapons training, and we were trading Jim Beam half gallons for the range, for some of the ammunition was on that that barter, and we used our you get ration card. You're only allowed to I see Scott or whatever his name say, hi Scott, how you doing? Loved your old man. Anyway, he had the whiskey, and he was you know what a Hummel plate is?
Nah, no sir.
It's a porcelain plate. It's like collector plate and that.
Oh yeah, okay.
They're made by a company called Hummel, and he collected them, and they're expensive. They're like $75 a piece, you know. So I think we had 16 half gallons, 8 gallons of whiskey that we owed to the Germans for using their range up in on the coast, the north coast of Germany. And the Spies, the sergeant major from the Germans, came over, and I was there with the team sergeant. He says, he started to talk about they were missing some whiskey, and the team sergeant excused himself and left the room. And I'm talking to the guy. I go, "What's wrong?" He said, "We're missing like 8 bottles." And I said, "Well, that can't be. We brought 16 down." He said, "We only got 8." Then we tossed the team sergeant's room. We found all these fucking plates that he bought with our whiskey. So the team jumped him and pummeled the crap out of him. And they called him back to Berlin because he, as the captain put it, he had lost the respect and the trust of the team. And Dick Gross came in as the team sergeant. And the first thing that he informed us of is that if any of us decided to gang pile him, there were going to be new tenants at the morgue.
Ooh.
Yeah. Good man, real good man. I mean, just really knowledgeable, really laid back, perfect. And close your eyes and think of a team daddy. Dick Gross fit it every inch of the way.
Until I got deeper into it, I always thought he was up north with you guys until I started speaking with the CCC guys and realized he was on the final Halo jump. I mean, him and Mark Gentry both.
Yeah, I'm down to about 15% of power, so
Okay.
I'm gonna lose you.
All right, here we go. Yep, let's. I hate to say it, we may have to get you back at some point in time because we've got a boatload of questions. But we'll go ahead and close this out. Let me get one more question someone has about the vagabonds, and we'll shut her down. Sorry if this was answered earlier, connected, but in Vagabonds, you use a lot of nicknames for your co-conspirators. I was wondering if any of those men were in SOG with you.
Hendricks was in SOG with me. There's a couple more in there. Pancho was in SOG with me. Yeah, I mean, that's who you go to. I mean, who else is going to take on something like that? You know, we're going to go into Algeria and kidnap these 2 kids back and bring them back to their mother in Minneapolis. Oh, sign me up for that. Okay, I can do it.
I was about to say, from you describing Mr. Hendricks, as I call him Hendrix, when I would first started saying it's Hendricks because all the personalities in his head. You said he would be. He sounds like he is the perfect man you would want covering your ass.
He only listens to the voices in his head. Remember that.
I love that. All righty, guys. Mr. Nick's running low on battery, and I will beg and plead to get him back so we can get the rest of these questions at some point in time. But Mr. Nick, would you like to say goodbye and anything else before we close?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you guys are interested in the history of the unit I was at, that we were in. And like I said, you're going to have to carry the truth forward so it doesn't become all myth and fantasy in the future, and that we were not giants of the battlefield. We were just normal guys doing a difficult job. And there was also the benefits of, when you had some time off, there was a lot of leeway on your actions as long as you're willing to come back and do that job again. So it worked out for both sides really well. Thank God that this country produces people that are able to do this sort of thing. They're still out there. They're still doing it, and they're still making history. So, you start broadening your horizon, start looking at the sandbox and the rock pile and some of the stuff that was done by SF in the last 40 years that we've been shooting away.
I'm working my way there, but as long as I've got you guys around, I'm where I'm at and gonna stick there. So
there's another guy named Zach Wolf.
Yep.
And Zach mostly interviews World War II guys. and he does an excellent job of it, really excellent job of it. So, you know, there's a need for you guys, you know, try and temper your view of it. Try and
Obsession.
stick to the truth as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Of course,
And
there's some people that'll tell you that I only have a casual acquaintance with the truth.
I just appreciate you sharing and coming on here and letting us keep your history preserved and you sharing it with us. It means more than you can ever know, not only to me, but all of the people you've answered questions. So I just want to thank you for everybody for spending 2.5 hours with us today.
And Scott, is it Scott?
Yep, Scott.
Huh. We have to chat sometime. I really, really loved your old man. He was a big influence in my life for a while.
He's in the Facebook group as well that I run. If I can hook y'all up on there if I need to.
Yeah, sure. All right, that'd be cool. Thanks.
Excellent. I hope you have a great day, Mr. Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.